NTLF podcast, and today we discuss the theme of navigating the future. How do you look at jobs, skills, workplaces in an AI-dominated world? And we could not have a better speaker for this session. We have Cliff Jurkiewicz joining us. He's an AI anthropologist, futurist, strategist, commentator, a trained pilot, and a lot of other skills. Cliff, welcome to this podcast, and we look forward to having an engaging conversation with you as we look at what is this whole world of AI and what does it mean from the future of work perspective.
Thank you for having me, Sangeeta.
So Cliff, let's start with you. I mean, what does an AI anthropologist do, and tell us a little bit about what got you on that role.
Yeah, so I think it's a little bit of an amalgamation of a very strange career path that I've had. My career path has been very much like a rock wall, sometimes moving up or down and sideways versus the ladder analogy. And I've always been a technologist at heart, an early adopter of technology, all the way back from when I was a very, very young child. Where I could get access to technology. And so that my interest in technology sort of naturally leads me down a path of, looking at where innovation is happening. I'm so deeply curious about how technology is going to affect, support, and challenge the human condition. And this is going all the way back to the very first company that I ever started, where our literal mission was to help human beings and technology connect better. And so from that perspective, this is just a natural progression for me of my curiosity about how technology is going to affect the way that we work and live.
That's a very, very interesting career. And I think there isn't a better time to be in a technology-dominated world than we see today. There's so many different views about AI and where AI is today. There is the view that Mr. Harari and others have taken, which is all about AI will dominate humans and create this whole world of, almost lack of thinking individuals. And there is the other world which believes, no, AI is a great tool for augmentation. It will improve the quality of life and make us a much better world as we live forward. Tell us a little bit about how you're thinking about this whole AI world. Is it a hype? Is it a reality? Is it still we don't know environment? Love to get your perspectives there.
Yeah, I think Yuval Harari is sort of an interesting character in this space. I think, honestly, taking an alarmist position is, it does not do the technology any service, but even more so, I think it's a bit of a defeatist attitude in terms of the power of human nature. We have thousands of years of innovation as human beings, and we have always been adaptable and curious as to how these innovations will affect our lives while maintaining our place in the world. This technology is no different. It does have the effect on human beings, unlike other technologies, mechanical technologies, to say some technologies in agriculture or even the automobile. These mechanical innovations were very, very different in enabling human beings to do things very, very differently. Well, AI has a different angle just in terms of this fear, and Yuval Harari is sort of playing on that fear, which is essentially, will it replace us? And if you know anything about artificial intelligence, that is so impractical a thought that it is very salacious in terms of, what great movies are made out of, right? Thinking of the very famous movie from the United States called the Terminator, where this computer called Skynet essentially takes over the world and tries to wipe out humanity. That's really very provocative, and it sells movie tickets, but it's just not the reality of the technology. This technology is very much in its infancy. In order to get to that level of what we call artificial general intelligence, where it could have some cognitive ability, we are literally, decades upon decades away from that. The power that would be required, the data that would be required in order to have something like that happen literally does not exist. But what does exist, and what we do need to be very mindful of, is that this technology is powerful enough that it can replace human tasks, not people. AI does not experience the world the way that human beings do, does not have any real empathy, does not have any idea about what an experience actually is or isn't. It is mimicking what we've taught it based on things that have already happened. It can't even predict from human nature perspective exactly how human beings will respond to things. If you ask artificial intelligence, what's going to happen to human beings, it's completely guessing, and it's making a lot of assumptions. So yeah, I mean, it is, I think, in one way, a great emotional challenge to say to the market, be careful of this. It's going to replace you. And that's going to get someone a foot in the door for a conversation. And it makes for a really intriguing narrative. But it is so far from the truth. And I think we've got to be careful listening, to individuals that would use such tactics, because I think it undermines, human nature. As I said before, it's a bit defeatist to just think that human beings will simply give way to technology. It's actually never happened. What we do need to be mindful and careful of is the power of this technology to divide us, and be, that being we'll say it as the haves and the have-nots. Without some mechanism of ownership and control of artificial intelligence, democratizing AI in a way, and we can talk about that, the divide between the rich and the poor will become extremely significant. And I know that, we were talking a little bit about some other individuals like Jeffrey Hinton, who is, I think, going on a little bit of a guilt trip when he talks about universal basic income. But we can talk about that too, because I think that these are important concepts about where is the human being's place in all this. And we seem to be listening to people that would confuse us that our place isn't where it's always been, which is right at the heart of this, controlling this narrative and conversation, and obviously fighting for what we believe in and what is right. So that's what I would say. I'd say, don't listen to the naysayers. AI isn't as great. It's not as bad as people make it out to be, but we do have a responsibility to find our place in this conversation. And the one thing that you can't do as a human being is you can't ignore it. You can't not be a part of the conversation. You have to involve yourself. You have to engage. You have to make your voice heard, as we've done on any number of subjects throughout our history. This is no different, but the voices need to be a little bit more organized, unified, in terms of exactly what we're asking for. And I think that's probably where the most confusion is, because I don't know that that's happening yet.
But if I was to build on the argument of, if we look at history, we obviously have seen that automation technology has created more jobs than it has changed. But there is a school of thought which says that this AI is a general purpose technology. The pace of how AI is moving has been so rapid that we've not had it in the past. And hence, and I'm not taking the extremist or defeatist view, but the fact that the imperative for jobs has to be thought through in a much shorter time frame. You may not have the luxury of all the first 3-4 industrial revolutions that we've gone through. So when you think about jobs, say even just for the next 5 years, how do you see AI reshaping them in many ways? And I'm not talking about AI destroying jobs, but there is a whole focus around reshaping jobs. And anything for a country like India, with so many billion people and technology, jobs are being at the forefront of job wealth creation in India, we clearly worry about this topic a lot.
Yeah, and we're looking at it as well. Just from I sit in the United States, but work for a global company. We look at the footprint of artificial intelligence and what's happening. I think the most important thing to understand in the moment is you are exactly right. The problem with this technology is time. We don't have the time to respond to the technology the way that we have through other technological revolutions. We don't have decades. We have literally months to respond to it. But I think having that downward pressure from the technology saying, we're not going to give you a decade. You have to find a way to respond. Human beings tend to react to that very well. You look at, for example, what's happening here in the United States right now, what I'm doing right after this, we record this, I'm jumping in a plane and flying, very much needed supplies down to an affected area in the United States from a hurricane and flooding, where whole towns have been wiped out. And I know that those types of natural disasters affect the entire world. So the United States is not alone in that. But people come together during a time of crisis. And I'm not saying this is a crisis, it's certainly not. But it is a time to come together and say, we get to define what the next step is. And let me give you some specifics. What I would be looking at if I'm sitting, I'm any person, it doesn't matter if you're a young person or an older person sitting in the world, what is it that I should be learning right now in order to exponentially increase my value, in the workplace, to society, for myself and my family, my community? I would say there are 3 really important skills that will become even more important in the very near future. The first is critical thinking. If you're in any role, I don't care, and my particular company sits in the recruiting and retention space. We're a SaaS software company employing these technologies. We're training recruiters right now to think more critically about their business instead of transactionally. What does it mean to be more predictive, which is the second skill. So critical thinking being the first skill. The second skill is understanding the data and intelligence that these kinds of tools give us access to. They are going to give us access to information that we've never seen before, and it's going to all happen in real time. Human beings that can understand that data, how to analyze it, how to make some level of prediction from it, are going to be extraordinarily valuable. The tools themselves are actually really bad at that. Again, because they're learning from our past, they're also learning from our past mistakes. We're much better at critical thinking and data analyzation in terms of predicting where things are going to go than any tool out there is. The third skill that I think is very underutilized, and I think we've almost done ourselves a little bit of harm in the last 3 or 4 decades, is communication. And if you think about social media as probably one of the best and worst examples of human beings communicating, if we take the best of it, which is the ability to get a message out quickly and be heard, that's awesome. The real question is, what is the message, right? Is it truthful? Is it based in fact? Is it someone's opinion? And all those things are good, especially in societies that value democratized speech. I think there's a lot of value in that. The question really becomes, are you a good communicator? And what we've done, again, in my space with recruiters, is we've tied them to systems that don't allow them to be really good communicators. They have a desire to. So we need to rebuild that skill as human beings. So critical thinking and strategy, intelligence and statistical analysis, and communication are all going to elevate to very significant levels if, and this is the big if, you learn how to use these tools. And if you don't, that really is where the risk for human beings exists. If you're going to ignore this technology, the same way that some people ignored the automobile, the same way that some people ignored the computer age. And I'll give you a really specific example. In the early 2000s, travel agents around the world ignored sites like Expedia and Travelocity and some of the other Airbnb and Vrbo. They just ignored what those technologies were doing and changing the industry. At this point, compared to 2000, there are 80% less travel agents in the world than there was at that time. And there are some travel agents that have exploited those technologies in really meaningful ways and are developing service offerings and products around those technologies that are unmatched. Things that are experiential based, things that those tools don't, they can offer you a list of places to go, but they can't tell you what it's like to go there. And this is the big difference. So travel agents are a really good example, very small, but a very good example of here's what will happen to your role if you ignore these technologies. Versus really being able to understand, again, those 3 core skills and competencies that I just talked about. And if you apply them to create better experiences for human beings, you will be invaluable in your organization and in your profession.
So how trainable are these skills, Cliff, right? Because critical thinking, if you've been in a role for 10 years and that's not been your core task, how easy or difficult is it to train these skills?
I think you have to look at individualizing this type of training, right? And this is actually where these technologies can be very, very helpful at personalizing, looking at someone's role, their background, their experiences even outside of work, and saying, here's, this person, we want to train them, we want to upskill them in critical thinking or statistical analysis or communication. Build a personalized training program for this individual, but it also has to be tied to not just what we call knowledge transfer. You can't just have someone watch a YouTube video or watch some podcasts or read some books or whatever and think that they're going to have applicable skills. We also have to use these technologies to say, let's get you a small gig here or there. It's just some kind of work that's going to allow you to exercise that knowledge muscle and build some real skill around it that's demonstrable. And I think that that's a really important piece. So we not only have to use these technologies to identify personalized training, get that person to training, but also use these technologies to put them in what might be difficult situations and exercise and build that muscle memory around these skills. Not everybody is going to become the world's greatest philosopher and critical thinker. That's okay. But I think, and I believe in human nature, that most people will respond positively if we give them the opportunity and if we are clear about what the expectation is and give them the proper support. And that's really the responsibility of us as employers, as enterprise, as academic institutions. And I would say, tangentially, this is probably one of the biggest challenges for India right now, is that what people are learning in school isn't matching the industry expectation. And there needs to be a much closer partnership between academia and industry to develop this level of thought process and action planning around building these skills. And that, I would say, is something India would do well to start to embark on now. And I believe that that's happening. I attended the Global AI Summit about a month ago, and there was a lot of talk and actions being put in place from the minister, as well as industry leaders and people from academia. So I think you're well on your way to it, but I think it needs to be called out specifically as a gap when you compare India to the US or to China. China is outputting, give or take, about 1.3 million engineers that specialize in artificial intelligence a year. The US is putting out about 80 to 90,000. India is putting out about 200,000. So it's a little bit more than the US. However, there's a gap when they get to the professional marketplace. Both in China and the US, there's a domination of technology in the marketplace. There's a domination of startups. India is changing, and I think there were 90,000 startups, in 2023, which is hugely important. So it's growing, but you've got to close that gap if you want to be able to really compete. And I think, I don't mean to sound negative in any way, but I think the reality is, everyone is looking at China and saying, they're setting a model for investment in people and in finance into these technologies like never before. They're not bound by ethical, responsibilities. That's just a fact. Where I think India and US and many other countries are taking that responsibility very, very seriously. So we have to be mindful of how we're competing in this space. And being able to do that. So I think it's an important driver for India, is to match the industry expectation with the academic preparation.
No, I think very well articulated, Cliff, because India has all these diverse expectations. We want to be a leader in the tech sector. We want the AI strategy to be something that's truly inclusive and democratic. We want to make sure it's safe, trusted, responsible. So clearly, I think the skill sets that we are looking at have to be thought of at a we need to learn from China, we need to learn from US, but we also need to build an India model that will, truly help us achieve these different goals that we've set ourselves for. I'm going to shift gears a little and talk about what does AI do to the workplace and the workforce, right? I mean, you've had a certain type of workplace in the past. We've heard all these things about how AI may, displace a level of middle management that may not be needed today, or how individuals and the agentic AI workforce will also exist along with humans. How do you see this picture of the future workforce that is augmented with AI?
Yeah, I think when I think about this, what's important is to understand personal agency. And if we look at the current ecosystem of work, whether it's a brick and mortar place that you're reporting to every day, or your work from home, or it's a hybrid of that. And obviously the work flexibility, the pandemic taught us that there needs to be a much larger conversation around flexible work arrangements, and that we can be successful. But at the same time, I think there is a very sound argument that says when you gather human beings into a place, and they are sitting, standing, conversing next to each other, that really great things happen that intrinsically don't happen when we're all sitting from home. So I'm a believer in the hybrid model, and I think there are going to be times when this technology is used to make the argument that more in person is necessary than it really is. And I don't think that that's a valid argument. So I think people have to be mindful of their own personal agency and what's important to them, and be able to bring that argument, but also you've got to be willing to compromise. And these technologies are going to force some level of compromise between employers and employees, and work flexibility and skill building, and roles and things of that nature. I think we need to keep in mind that employers are no smarter than the individual employee when it comes to what is actually going to change. I mean, we're all trying to figure this out. And I think there's going to be a default position of and we've seen this in industry, let me just force everyone back to work because I feel, right, as the owner of the company, or as the manager of a company, that is where I'm comfortable starting the conversation. I need to have you here, then we can talk. When the reality is, if enough people band together, and understand that they have to compromise, making demands is not going to get either side anywhere. But the technology shouldn't be used as the ping pong in that conversation. It doesn't matter what the technology is. That human beings need to be, treated with respect, but those same human beings need to treat their employers with respect too, because this is a partnership. In some ways, employee-employer relationships are very much like marriages, maybe not as personal, but in terms of two entities coming together trying to achieve a common goal. Well, if you don't know what the common goal is, whether the technology is there or not, then none of it works. The technology just creates confusion. So I think we've got to be careful in this conversation not to put technology at the heart of creating value systems and good culture, looking at it as an enablement of that, versus just a driver of that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think if technology cannot be the end goal, right? Technology is a means to an end, and you have to use it wisely in the right context of what your organization and your goals and values and culture and all of that is. I think a related question, Cliff, while that's not very AI centric, is the whole issue of mental wellness. And, in the workplace, we're seeing a lot more conversations, concerns around this theme. And we've also seen some AI applications that help people dealing with mental wellness issues. But how are you seeing this from your perspective? And what are some ways to address this?
Yeah, this is where I actually think these technologies, and admittedly, I've already talked about this, they don't really have empathy, right? They don't really understand experience. However, these tools are actually quite good at helping people communicate, and help them understand their own situation. And in some cases, can be a great bridge to someone reaching out for help. I do a lot of work with the mental health community. I have a charity. It's the neon sign behind me. It's called Kyle's Wish Foundation. You can go to kyleswish.com if you want to learn more about that. I lost a son, to overdose and struggling through his mental health issues. And myself and my wife have dedicated ourselves to helping that community. And one thing I will tell you is we're starting to use these tools. There are a number of tools out there. I won't name them. They're not hard to find, that are conversational artificial intelligence chatbots, AI agents that are being used in the mental health community to help people communicate their situation. At least in the US, and this is probably true for much of the world, we've treated mental health as somebody else's problem. And the reality is that both physical and mental health are equally important to the overall health of a human being and helping them understand their place in society and feeling valued as a person, which is very, very important. That's the sense of belonging that we all seek. And the change, the advocacy that AI can help with in bridging that gap when somebody is in trouble. And I'll talk about my experience in the US because it's obviously where I live. There is a huge lack of mental health professionals. I think if I've got the stat right, for every 10 medical physicians, there's one mental health practitioner. And that's a really big problem. And the pandemic has created a mental health crisis in this world, and there just aren't enough professionals. This is where this technology can actually be a big benefit. We create conversational artificial intelligence that understands the language of mental health, can help someone interact, can ask the right questions, describe what you're going through, right? And all the while being transparent, like this is artificial intelligence. What I have found in my second career as working with the mental health community is a receptiveness to those tools is very, very high. People actually like the initial interaction with them because they don't feel like they're being prosecuted, that they can just have an open conversation and then take all that information, understand and help diagnose the person, triage the issue, and then direct them with that information to a mental health professional. And all of that triage has already been done. So they can get help much faster and much more acutely and personalized than they would have before. So it gets them plugged into the mental health ecosystem in a far more meaningful way. And we've been very, very successful using these tools. I think in the workplace, this is where these tools being offered in the workplace for burnout, for stress, for problems like harassment, and being able to communicate and report that, I think are going to be very, very helpful. Employers just have to understand the benefit, and we have a duty to explain that benefit right now. So I think these tools are going to be extremely helpful. Stress and burnout is the number one thing right now. It is by far the biggest problem that employers have, and their answer to it is, we'll give you a monthly subscription. We'll pay for a monthly subscription to some online health counseling. Well, talk therapy is good. We basically treat mental health in two ways: talk therapy and medication. But there's a whole thing around mental health that people don't understand. And I'm a recovering alcoholic. I speak about that quite openly, of over a decade at this point. And I know this community very, very well. The one thing that helps people more than anything is building a community around them that supports them in their mental health journey. The same way that we would build something around someone's physical goals. Like if I want to be a runner or a weightlifter, I'm going to go to the gym, I'll make some friends. We're going to go running together on the weekends, right? We're going to do a triathlon. We're going to cycle. We're going to do these things, we're surfing, whatever it might be. You build this community. Mental health is the same way. When we build a community around people to support mental health, they become well. They become, they gather a sense of belonging. So these tools through employers could be a great bridge for that. Instead of just throwing a subscription at the problem and saying you're on your own, really get involved, and understand what these tools can do. And I think that they will be a huge benefit in the future.
That's very, very well said, Cliff, that how do you use these tools well in the workplace? and how do workplace HR leaders understand how to make these available, not just being judgmental about many of these issues. I know we're going to run out of time, so I'm going to come to my last question, Cliff. One of the points you mentioned about was the divide that AI can create, right? The rich get richer. We're already seeing the big tech is where all the action is, and a lot of others are struggling. But even at a citizen level, at an employee level, we can see a large gap coming in if AI is not deployed much more democratically. And we've talked about Jeffrey Hinton and how he's saying we may need to think of universal basic income. What's your perspective on doing AI more democratically so that every citizen can benefit? And I think that, again, for a country like India is a huge imperative.
Yeah. So where Jeffrey Hinton and I are going to disagree is on universal basic income, because I think that's economic pacification. I think the problem with it is whenever, and we've seen this throughout history, and you see it in the United States with programs around welfare, and we absolutely should help people that need the help. I want to be very, very clear. The liberal me always wants to give a helping hand. And some of those people will need that helping hand permanently. That's just the human nature. We need to support those people. But universal basic income is a different story. And that is not democratizing AI. That is pacifying, what some people believe is going to be the gap between the haves and the have-nots. Unfortunately, universal basic income in this instance will create a wider gap, because it'll be the haves that will tell people what the universal basic income will be. And what you really want is access to the technology. And that's what we have to do. So there's a couple of things that I think about in terms of democratizing AI. Number one, AI does not work without our data, right? And so why should the big conglomerate companies have access to our data, be able to profit from that data, and we see no benefit? And so I think that democratizing ownership of artificial intelligence. Now, what that looks like to me is that you might have companies that are creating artificial intelligence, but if you want your artificial intelligence to work, you need access to massive amounts of data, and it'll be human-based experiential data that they need. We can all benefit from that. So instead of being universal basic income, tie it to artificial intelligence, tie it to the profitability and the growth of these companies, and they get to pay. Now, I'll give you an example of where this works very well. In Alaska, in the United States, oil-rich state, every person in the state of Alaska gets a stipend. I think it's about $1,000 a year from the oil industry, from the profits of the oil industry. Now, some may argue the global impact of this, and I get that. Like, and those arguments on the environment are for another day. We're just talking about taking something that industry is benefiting from and is sharing in the profits with its individuals. So there are really good examples around the world where this is already happening. AI should be one. That's how we democratize AI. We democratize ownership of artificial intelligence. The second way, just in the time that we have to make sure that people have a voice in the conversation. We can't just be talking to Meta, Google, OpenAI, Microsoft of the world. We have to be talking and give the individual agency into this conversation and a say. And that's truly democratizing AI as well. Now, industry is going to push back on this for all the reasons that they're going to push back. I just don't think there's going to be an argument if enough people speak up and enough people say that we're doing this. I just don't think that there's going to be an argument to say that industry should be allowed to control and profit from this powerful technology. This is the one technology that can be democratized, and it should be. So those are my two things that, in terms of what the conversation should be talking about today.
Very powerful idea. I know implementation would be a hard thing, but
Yes.
I think getting people to think about it and get the right policy direction going on it, even getting conversations on it, is a great starting point. Cliff, I know we're out of time, but thank you so much for this very, very interesting discussion. The world of work and AI continues to evolve. So I hope we can connect back with you at maybe a few months down the line and see where it's moving and what changes lie ahead.
Yeah, in a few months. Thank you for having me, Sangeeta. But I want to say is in a few months, I might completely change everything I just said because that's the world we're living in right now. It's all changing
Exactly.
that quickly. So yes, I look forward to a
Yes.
future discussion.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Take care.